I've been thinking about all those images we've watched on television of people suffering from COVID-19. And then before that, before lockdown, we had all the flooding that happened and people were in a terrible state and suffering again. So why do you think God lets people suffer?
Well, in our world, we witness forces for good and bad. And the Bible teaches that God is a force for good and there is a force for evil. So good and bad things happen, exist. That's why it is. But why does God allow?
Well, suffering, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, nobody chooses to suffer, or certainly don't enjoy it. But there are some good things that come from it, I suppose. People develop really good characteristics, don't they? Patience, endurance, determination, perseverance. We've had lots and lots of examples of that during the VE Day celebrations, when we've had film clips of people, what they've endured during the war. But apart from character building, what else? Does anything good come from suffering?
Yeah, definitely. You've got Joseph in the Bible. He had 10 brothers who were so jealous of him that they sold him into slavery. And yet God did something amazing in that event, and he became leader of Egypt, and in turn saved all his brothers and rescued them from drought and famine. COVID-19, that's resulted in thousands suffering and dying, and yet this tragedy has thrown light on people's sacrificial kindness towards complete strangers.
But also we've had a massive impact on climate change during our lockdown period because of COVID, haven't we?
Yeah.
And that's going to have a positive impact on climate change too. But if God created a perfect world, why do people have to suffer like they do?
Well, because the Bible teaches that God created mankind to be a companion. We were created with a brain, a heart, a conscience, and we were created, though, to make our own choices with God's guidance. We call this free will. And when man chose to do his own thing, he chose to ignore what God said. And some of these choices had and still have dire consequences. Self-interest leads into greed, mistreatment of others, jealousy, murder. They still do.
So, are you saying that suffering is a result of sin?
Absolutely. But what about natural disasters? Does God cause that sort of suffering?
No, not necessarily. It's a lot to do with choice, isn't it? And if you choose to live in a volcanic area or an earthquake zone, you're going to risk suffering. If you build your house on a floodplain, that's another risk.
Yeah. Fish Lake.
Yeah, that's right, in Yorkshire. You're going to suffer then. But there are also man-made disasters, aren't there? Nuclear explosions where thousands of people have died, like Hiroshima.
Yeah.
And then there were other... Well, we've got the air pollution is an issue now, haven't we?
Yeah.
Where people are causing people to have breathing difficulties, even cancers.
Yeah. Well, why doesn't God stop that sin then, and that causes such suffering? Why doesn't he choose a better option or the best option?
Well, if he stopped evil and sin, I suppose he'd need to take away our free will. I think everybody agrees we'd want God to stop thoughts that lead to actions such as murder and rape. But we all have wrong thoughts at times, don't we? So if we're going to say that we want God to stop suffering and stop us making bad choices, then God would have to stop our right to free will and our own thoughts and making our own decisions. So, after all, now do you think that God allows people to suffer?
Well, because we have free will and make choices, there will be suffering. However, God can turn some of that suffering into something better, even amazing. Sometimes innocent people do suffer. We don't know why this happens or why God allows it to happen.
So what does the Bible have to say about suffering?
Well, the Bible teaches that suffering is a result of human sin, and ultimately God will come and cleanse the world of that sin and suffering.